There is a kind of calm that is not gentle, not soft, not peaceful in the way most men imagine. It is forged in silence, in isolation, in suffering that leaves no marks on the skin, only on the spirit. Miyamoto Musashi did not become the greatest swordsman in Japan because he was born gifted. He became unstoppable because he walked through pain that would have broken other men, and he learned to breathe inside of it. At 13, he killed a man in a duel. At 16, he had already buried the last pieces of his childhood. By 30, he had faced more than 60 life-or-death battles, not for glory, not for fame, but to carve away the parts of himself that were weak, frightened, or uncertain. Musashi discovered something most men run from. Pain is the doorway to ruthless calm, because once you survive your own suffering, the world can no longer threaten you. This is not a lesson of comfort. This is the path of steel, solitude, and stillness, where a man learns to meet life with unshakable composure, even when the world around him burns. If this path speaks to you, walk with us, stay, listen, and learn. They say a child becomes who the world teaches him to be, but Musashi's world was not gentle. His father, Shinmen Munisai, was a master of the sword, cold, exact, merciless. He believed softness was a disease, so he trained the boy not with affection, but with intensity. No praise, no comfort, no warm embrace when the nights were long and the wind cut through the house like winter glass. When other children were taught how to bow, to speak softly, to obey, Musashi learned how to fall and stand again. He learned that tears changed nothing. Pain demanded respect, not escape, and silence held more power than protest. A spirit begins to harden long before a man realizes he will need that armor. There were nights Musashi lay awake, staring at the ceiling beams of the old house, hearing the distant clatter of his father practicing alone in the dark, the rhythm of the wooden floorboards, the sharp exhale with every strike, the silence in between, heavier than the sound. He did not understand it then, but that silence was the training too. Silence teaches a boy about himself. It shows him the weight of his own thoughts, the shape of his fears, the truth beneath his anger. Most men run from this silence their entire lives. Musashi was forced to sit inside it, and in that stillness, a seed was planted, not of cruelty, but of endurance. The world had not yet tested him, but he had already learned how to withstand. A storm was approaching, and the boy was ready to meet it. He was only 13 when the challenge came. The village square, the cold morning air, the smell of wet earth after a night of rain. People gathered, some curious, some afraid, some eager for spectacle. No one intervened. No one said, "He is just a boy." The opponent was older, a trained warrior, confident, loud, certain of victory. Musashi held only a wooden staff, rough, splintered, cut from a fallen branch. His hands were shaking, not from fear, but from something deeper, a knowing. A moment that felt like standing at the edge of a cliff with no ground behind him. There is a moment right before life changes, where time seems to hesitate, where the world holds its breath. Musashi stepped forward, not to prove strength, but because there was no one left to be afraid of. The strike itself was not elegant. It was not beautiful. It was survival. The older warrior lunged first, certain the boy would flinch. But Musashi did not move back. He moved through. The wooden staff cracked against bone. A gasp, a stumble, another strike, and then stillness. The world did not roar. No celebration, no triumph, just silence, and the sound of Musashi's breath, sharp and uneven, like someone learning how to breathe for the very first time. The crowd stepped back, forming a circle of distance, not out of respect, but out of fear. Something in the air had changed. The boy had crossed a threshold that could never be reversed. He had seen how fragile life was, how easily it could disappear. And once a person witnesses the thinness of existence, they can never return to who they were before. The road ahead would not lead him home. It would lead him away from everything he had ever known. After the duel, Musashi did not stay. He did not celebrate. He did not let the village turn him into a legend or a warning. He simply walked away. There are journeys that begin on roads, and there are journeys that begin inside the mind. Musashi's pilgrimage was both. He crossed valleys where mist clung to the soil like unspoken secrets. He slept under trees whose roots curled like clenched fists. He drank from rivers so cold they felt like awakening. But it was not the land that changed him. It was the silence. Days passed without conversation. Weeks without a single familiar voice. The world grew quieter, then quieter still, until the only sound left was his own breathing. And when a man is left alone with only his breath, he begins to hear the truth he once feared. In that silence, Musashi encountered an enemy more difficult than any warrior of flesh and steel: himself. The doubts he thought he buried. The fears he pretended he never had. The anger shaped by years of cold discipline and unanswered questions. He trained not just his sword, but his awareness. He learned to strike without hesitation, to breathe before thought, to see the moment before it arrived, not with eyes, but with presence. When he challenged dojos across the provinces, it was not for pride. It was to test the lie that strength was external. And every battle, every victory, every bruise carved deeper into him the same realization: a warrior is not shaped by the world. He is shaped by the silence he does not run from. Yet, even as he grew stronger, there was something he still could not face. A shadow within him, waiting, silent, patient. Victory is a dangerous thing. After dozens of duels, Musashi could have allowed the world to crown him. Stories of him traveled faster than his footsteps. Towns whispered his name like a warning. Dojo masters locked their doors when they heard he was near. The young warriors admired him. The older ones feared him. Ego could have drunk deeply from that admiration. But Musashi had seen something most men never see. He had seen how easily life could end, how quickly a body can fall, how fragile identity truly is. So instead of celebrating, he withdrew. He stopped speaking of victory. He stopped acknowledging praise. He stopped letting others define who he was. Because the moment a man believes he is his reputation, he becomes a prisoner to the eyes of others. Musashi refused that prison. He began to train in places no one would see him. Riverbanks before dawn, caves where the air hung damp and cold, forests where the only witnesses were crows. He meditated until hours dissolved into breaths, until breath dissolved into silence, until silence dissolved into selflessness. A man who does not cling to identity cannot be insulted. A man who is not chasing victory cannot be defeated. A man who does not fear death cannot be controlled. This is what Musashi learned, and it terrified those who watched him. Because strength rooted in ego can be challenged, but strength rooted in stillness has no opening. His sword was no longer an extension of his pride. It was an extension of his clarity. And clarity is the most dangerous weapon a man can carry. But clarity has a final test, one that would lead him into the mountains and into the dark quiet of his own soul. There comes a point in a warrior's life where the blade no longer needs to taste blood, where power no longer needs to announce itself, where victory is not taken, but understood. In his later years, Musashi walked through towns like a quiet storm. He carried 2 swords at his waist, yet everyone felt the weight of a third presence, an invisible edge, sharpened far beyond steel. People bowed without words. Children watched him with wide, unblinking eyes. Old masters avoided meeting his gaze directly. not out of fear of death, but out of recognition. He had become the type of man who could break another's spirit with a single look, not because of cruelty, but because he had defeated every war inside himself. The world could no longer move him. He had become still. He spent his final years not in courts, not in dueling halls, but in the mountains, a cave carved into stone, silent and cold, where wind moved like slow breathing. There, he wrote the Book of Five Rings, not as a manual for killing, but as a map for conquering the self. The strokes of each brush line were slow, deliberate, unhurried. No urgency, no restlessness, just presence. People traveled for miles to find him, young warriors craving glory, old generals seeking the secret to peace. They expected a lecture, a technique, a hidden strike. But Musashi taught them one thing: the ultimate sword is the one that remains sheathed. Because a man who can destroy, but chooses not to, is a man who has mastered himself. Yet in the cave, there hung one object he never explained, a rusted blade, wrapped in a single red thread. No one knew why he kept it, and no one ever asked. But some say that thread was tied to the one battle he could not win, the one inside. Not everyone is meant to become a swordsman. Not everyone is meant to walk into forests alone, sleep against cold stone, or face death in the eyes of another man. But every person will face pain. Silent pain, private pain, the kind of pain no one applauds you for surviving. Musashi's life teaches something the world often hides. Strength is not built by avoiding suffering. It is built by remaining present inside it. Most people try to outrun discomfort. They distract themselves, they numb themselves, they pretend they are unbothered. But pain you run from becomes a shadow that follows you. Pain you sit with becomes a doorway. Pain you learn to breathe through becomes power. Unshakable calm is not born from peace. It is born from surviving your storms without collapsing inside them. Calm is not the absence of struggle. Calm is the mastery of response. Musashi did not become unmovable because life was kind to him. He became unmovable because he stopped resisting reality. He let pain shape him instead of define him. He let solitude refine him instead of break him. He learned to breathe where others would drown. And this is where most men fail. They want strength without sacrifice, confidence without doubt, peace without confrontation, victory without loss. But there is a quiet law that governs every transformation. A man becomes what he can endure. So if you are in pain, you are in the forge. If you are alone, you are being shown yourself. If you are afraid, you are standing at the threshold of growth. The question is no longer, why is this happening? But rather, who will I become because of it?